How's it going, everyone? In this video, I'm going to go over 5 considerations for being happy at work. So, I think it's fairly common for people to not be completely fulfilled or happy when they're working. And there are a number of reasons for this. A lot of the times, the jobs that are available or the jobs that we need to take at certain points in our life aren't exactly the things that we want to be doing, or certain aspects of jobs are really not as fun as we would like. So there are a couple different things that you can think about as you think about work to improve your relationship with work and your experience working. Because for the vast majority of us, we're going to have to spend the majority, if not at least all of our lives. So I'm going to talk about a few different considerations for being happy at work because most, if not all of us, are going to have to spend the majority of our lives, or at least some portion of our lives, actually doing work. So the more we can do to kind of work on this relationship and get into the position we want to be, the better off we're going to be because, again, for a lot of people, it's a lot of your time. And some people try to kind of segment that out and say, oh, this is work and this is life. But with so much of your time going into work, it's really important to find something that's sustainable and produces happiness, or at least the best level of well being that's possible. So, the first consideration is basically finding a sense of purpose in your work. This is really important for being able to enjoy your work. And when I say find a sense of purpose in your work, for some positions that can be a little bit hard at face value, right? So, let's say that you're working at a fast food place. And for most people, kind of working at the bottom tier of a fast food place is not their ideal place to be, right? And there are aspects of the job they don't enjoy. But there are a number of different ways to look at purpose. And no matter what the job is, you're providing some sort of value. You're creating something, right? Because you're getting paid for that value. Now, it may not be your, grand idealist dream of world peace, but then again, no one's doing that, right? There is a huge number of people, and everyone has to basically find a way to contribute some amount. And that means that you're not always going to be doing the most crazy giant thing. That doesn't mean that the work you're doing isn't important. So there's a couple different ways to look at purpose in your work. And if you're having a hard time finding connection through your job, and I think there are a number of ways to do that. You can kind of look at your direct impact, right? If you're doing a fast food thing, if you're doing a retail thing, these are jobs that people often don't appreciate or like, but you are creating something, right? You're giving value to someone. You're either giving someone food, which gives them sense of convenience or like some amount of health or nutrition or whatever else. Same with retail, like you help people find certain things, etc., etc. So there's always an angle there. But if you're having trouble in that realm, there are two other things that you can look at. One is kind of skill growth, right? What is it that you're actually working on? Because a lot of the times what happens in these jobs that aren't liked much is that you aren't feeling like you're building any skills. You're not feeling like you're going anywhere. So again, regardless of what the job is, you can find places to start building skills and developing. If it's a customer facing type of thing, you can find, new communication tactics. If it's sales, maybe sales tactics. You can find ways to kind of work on these skills. Now, the secondary bonus of working on specific skills and finding skills that you can gain in your job is that you're going to be able to transition those a lot of times into other jobs and demand better conditions or pay or whatever it is that you're looking for. The second thing to think about if your job isn't quite what you want it to be and you're looking for a sense of purpose is keeping in mind what the job is doing for you. How is it serving you, right? Because if you didn't need the job, you wouldn't have it. So even if it's not exactly where you want to be and it's not leading exactly to the destination you want, having some source of income support your other goals is a sense of purpose in itself, right? It's kind of the same as if you're working a job to support a family. You may not like every specific detail of that job, but it has a purpose in the sense of it's doing something for you, but you have to look at the bigger picture. In the same way, if you are working doing something you don't really want to do, but waiting to get into something that you want or working towards that, then that is a sense of purpose. That is something that you're doing, and it makes the time there worthwhile in some way. The last thing to kind of think about is looking at your job from a holistic career perspective. And one way to find purpose could be that, maybe there are these jobs, these lower level or entry level type jobs where you aren't exactly where you want to be, but it's kind of, even if it's tangential, building the skills that you need, right? If it's getting you closer to the path you want to be on, that's another way that you can derive purpose. And those are just a couple ways of thinking about or starting to think about getting purpose from your work, because that's a really important part of staying motivated and getting things done and whatnot, is knowing in some way how your position connects. And I talked about this a little bit, but there's also positions where finding a sense of purpose through what you're actually producing is available if you just sit down and think about it for a minute. So, for example, maybe you're kind of in the back of some organization building up platforms or doing HR or doing something else, and the things that you contribute may not be exactly okay. I see how this impacts everyone in the world at once, but just finding some way that you produce value, which is almost definitely true given that you're getting paid to produce something, that can help for a lot of people too. So the second consideration for being happy at work is basically being proactive, right? There are a lot of people who find themselves unhappy with work, but aren't doing much to basically change their situation. And one of the things that you can do, that may not always work, but is worth trying, is ask or look for a third path or negotiate where you can for things that you don't like, right? If you're performing well, you have some amount of leverage in your job to change things. It may not always work out, but you never know if you don't ask. And I think most people don't ask. They just kind of have these things that they carry around with them, like, oh, I hate this about my job, I hate this. But they've never actually been proactive and tried to change anything. They've never had a conversation with their manager trying to see if they can get what they need or what they want. And so it hasn't happened. So that's one of the strong steps that you can take for being happier at work, is just looking at these things you dislike or that you want changed and actually trying to take a move towards making it better. Maybe you want to work from home once a week. Maybe your company doesn't currently do that. But if you've never talked about it, if you've never asked about it, if you've never been proactive and made any moves on it, then you can't say that it's not an option, right? This can make huge differences. Just asking for things, while it may not always work, can produce tangible differences and make things significantly better at work. But you have to take the steps to actually do something. Going along with being proactive, another thing that people tend to really not like is not getting enough feedback. And most times this is also paired with not asking for feedback. So, unless you have a really awesome manager, they're not going to proactively just kind of tell you things to work on, look close, like really closely at your performance, figure out exactly what you need to do. So you should also take responsibility for having those conversations and for guiding yourself toward the things that you want out of work. It's your responsibility to be proactive. It's really nice when they do it for you, but it's up to you to make sure you ask for the feedback and put it in the framework and talk to the people that you need to get where you want to be. The third consideration for being happy at work is to develop relationships. And of course, this is, something you hear all the time, is like, work on your relationships, like people, get along. And, it's a little soft on the surface, but this is really important at work, that you have good relationships. And that doesn't necessarily mean you get along with everyone and that you're best friends and you hang out all the time, but you need to have enough rapport that you can get your work done without communication causing a lot of friction, right? So a couple of the ways to do this are, first, you should really be in regular communication with your boss or your reports. Whoever you have, you should be talking to on a regular basis, just to really have kind of a pulse on what they're doing and get to know each other a little bit better. Now, this may seem a little soft in some contexts, but it's a lot easier to work with people you actually know, and it's also a lot easier to kind of cut off potential problems at the head when you're in regular communication. And that doesn't mean, oh, you talk to them for a few hours every day, but, having some sort of regular one-on-one scheduled or some sort of interaction or something that's maybe a little formal, but maybe not, but just to catch up and get on the same page. The same thing applies with your coworkers, right? You want to build up these relationships, because as you go through the workplace, one of the things that is most often frustrating to people is interpersonal problems. And the more people you have bought in and the more sway you have around the office and the more people like you and you like them, the easier it is to solve these problems and the easier it is to find ways to make work more agreeable. And the ideal situation is when something bothers you, you can actually just talk to someone about it directly and get it solved. You can't do that if your relationships are weak and you don't really ever talk to people and you just wait till they boil up. So again, being proactive and getting on top of those relationships and building them up, again, doesn't have to be a huge time commitment all the time, but just, some check-ins, maybe asking, coworkers, how do you like to work? What do you prefer? Or asking your boss, what can I do to make your job easier? Things like that. And having those relationships is really going to make your work experience better. Now, the fourth consideration for being happy at work is finding a way to do what you like as much as possible. And by that I mean a lot of what people don't like at work is some portion of the work being something unenjoyable. So, for example, if you worked at retail or a bank or fast food, maybe part of your responsibilities are to clean the bathroom. And while that may be in some scenarios, something you just have to do, in other scenarios, it could be something that you can try to kind of delegate or find a more efficient way to do it or find a way to batch it, right? Like anything that you can do to make the things that you don't want to do less imposing is going to improve your sense of well-being at work. So a lot of times, again, there are things that you have to do that you aren't going to like, but finding the best ways to do them can really help so that you don't have to spend as much time in this thing you hate. So if you have, these certain things that you don't like in your job, consider taking some time to figure out ways to streamline it so that you can ultimately focus more of your energy on the things you do like. The fifth consideration is essentially just managing your expectations, right? There are some number of people who think that they will be able to get a job where they only do things they like all the time. And that's really not super realistic, right? The vast majority of people have some aspect of their job that they don't like. And again, it goes back to kind of taking responsibility for being proactive, asking for changes as you can, and streamlining the work that you don't like as much as possible, and finding a sense of purpose in the stuff that you don't like so that you can push through it. Those things and kind of just having expectations set around what's realistic compared to what you may have to do is going to help a lot. Now, doing something that you're miserable at all the time, like 100% of the job is miserable, that's probably a good sign to look for something else or look for some serious changes that can be made. But if there's some small things here and there that you don't like and you're really letting them kind of bog down your day when they happen, it may be more useful to work on your relationship with those specific instances and interactions if you can find a way to really just get them done and get them out of the way. And, just expect that most jobs will have some things like this. But if you can get them down to a really small amount and you're happy 99% of the time and just deal with it the other 1% of the time, that's probably going to be a pretty good place to be in. The second piece of managing expectations is to be realistic about your options while taking action towards more. So I think the way that I see this most commonly is in promotions, right? There are many, many people, especially those earlier in their career, I that think they deserve promotions really, really fast. And while each individual case may vary, you have to consider what's realistic. And I'm not saying not to push for a promotion, but to expect, a promotion where you've been working for 3 months and in general people get promoted in 2 years. The pieces of information are just not quite aligned unless your performance is extremely high or an order of magnitude above. You kind of have to consider what it is that's most likely to happen. And of course, there are paths where you can work really hard and really ramp up your performance and really stand out and make things different. But I've seen quite a few situations where people are performing average or below average and expect to get promoted or get rewarded at an above average rate. Looking at those options with a realistic lens gives you an idea of what's most likely to happen. Again, I really think you should be pushing for options. You should kind of weigh out, okay, is the extra effort worth this, or what's the path here? If I took another job, would I be able to make more money or have better hours or whatever else? All these things should come into play, and all of these are considerations you should have. But managing your expectations and looking for what's realistic, I think, can help a lot because, I've been in this boat before too, where I thought I should be promoted. But actually, when I stepped back and took a more objective look at the whole picture, it didn't really make sense based on what I was doing. So that's just one thing to consider. I'm not trying to shoot down anyone's dreams, just help people think a little bit more about what's most realistic and what's fair and what fits. Because this can be really disappointing for people in work. And it also goes back to kind of taking responsibility for being proactive, figure out what it takes to get a promotion, figure out how close you are, figure out the details. Because I think a lot of people also do some work and then have this expectation, but they haven't filled in the gaps. So when they don't get it, they're really disappointed. And I think there are ways to connect those bridges. Again, there are times when things happen, you don't get what you deserve, or things just come out unfair and somebody else gets something. But a lot of the times, there's just kind of a misperception of what's actually going on and the position you're in. So that can be cleared up with some extra conversation. Now that gets me to the applicable content section. So here are a couple reflection questions. 1. Why are you in your current occupation? 2. How are you learning and growing at work? 3. What actions can you take to make work more enjoyable? So that's all I've really got for this video. Hopefully that helps you get a couple ideas of things to start looking at or considering as you try to improve your happiness at work. It really comes down to a lot of being proactive and a lot of getting things figured out, more so than kind of the situation you're in. But then again, don't get me wrong, the job you have makes a huge difference. It's always an option to look for other things that where you might be happier, because there are definitely better and worse fits for people. So don't rule that out. But a lot of situations we can't just leave willy nilly, and it takes some time to find something else. So it's all about doing the most with what you can and kind of looking for those quick wins. That's all I've got. So as always, if you have any questions, comments, topics you want me to cover, throw them down in the box below, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Other than that, I will see you next time.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.